Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Saturday, February 1st, 2025, and this is the Culture Academy LLC with another episode on leader logistics. Welcome. I just want to take a quick moment to introduce myself, Dr. Kiana Obang, affectionately known as Dr. Q. I am the CEO, founder, and the culture strategist for the Culture Academy LLC. I am super excited to share with you my 20 plus years in education. And during this time, I've served as a teacher, an instructional coach, an instructional systems specialist, a nice name for an instructional coach, a professional practice improvement specialist, a leadership coach, and now back in the building as a building administrator. I have also served in the private sector as well. So, leadership is my thing, professional learning is my thing. And so, I am so excited to share with you on today. So, let's get into our quote for today by Edward Deming. Without data, all we have is an opinion. Today's objectives. We are going to equip leaders with practical tools to interpret, analyze, and apply data effectively so that we can make great decision making and tighten up our decision making processes. I'm so excited because we've had an opportunity to survey our participants to find out what their top five concerns were as it related to leader logistics. And as a result, we developed a 5 session series on these top concerns. In the last few sessions, we have talked about the following topics: managing time effectively, developing and managing professional learning plans, managing staff and delegating effectively. And today we're talking about navigating data driven decision making. And our next and last leadership logistics topic will be long range planning and calendar management. One of the strategies that has helped us as we navigated through these leader logistics series is to start off with a self assessment to ground our work for the session. So, here we are for today's 5 self assessment questions as it relates to data driven decision making. Question number 1: do you regularly collect and review data from multiple sources? Question 2: are your decisions consistently based on data analysis rather than intuition alone? Number 3: how well do you involve stakeholders in the data interpretation process? Number 4: do you have a system for monitoring the outcomes of data-driven decisions? And number 5: how confident are you in interpreting visual representations of data, such as charts, graphs, and/or dashboards? As we think about the self-assessment that we just took, we could think about those questions aligning with 5 buckets. The first bucket is collecting and reviewing data. And when we think about collecting and reviewing data, we want to make sure that we are pulling data from various sources, not just one. We want to ensure that we're getting the best full picture, a holistic view, if you will, a 360 view of all the different pieces that make up the decision that we need to make. So again, we should not just be selecting data from one data point. It should be from a variety of sources that are legitimate, that is. The second big bucket that we could think about is data versus intuition. Oftentimes we go with gut reactions or cardiac feelings, but data ensures that we remain objective. So the hard numbers, which is quantitative data, or feelings of perceptions, that is qualitative data. And all of that has its place when making data driven decisions. We want to also make sure, bucket number 3, that we are involving stakeholders. We want to make sure, just like we're getting a variety of data sources, we also want to get diverse perspectives from each of the stakeholders that we're involving to ensure that we have a rich sense of the data that we have so that we are able to interpret it and see it from multiple perspectives. The fourth bucket that we can look at is monitoring outcomes. One thing we have to know is that decisions are incomplete without follow through. So we can make all decisions that we want, but if we don't follow up or follow through to see how things work, if we need to monitor and adjust, then we just wasted our time. And lastly is interpreting data visuals. Excuse me. Visuals make sure that we take what's complex and break it down to make sure that we can better understand it. Now that we've identified our big buckets, let's talk about some strategies to address in each of these categories. When we're talking about collecting and reviewing data, we want to make sure that we have a proper data collection cycle in place. So first, we want to figure out how we're going to collect the data. Are we going to use surveys, which is going to give us qualitative data? Are we going to use performance metrics, which is going to give us quantitative data? Are we going to use feedback forms, which is just like another version of a survey to gather to collect the data? Then, are we going to use a protocol to review the data? How are we going to compile it? How are we going to disaggregate it? What are we looking at? And so I really like to use a protocol to see what do I notice about the data? What is the data saying without putting my feelings into anything? Which leads us to the next point about data versus intuition. It is great to use your intuition, but that is not objective, as we mentioned before. So, by having a data protocol or a data decision matrix, this way we can look at the different outcomes that we could take as a result of the data and the impact that that will have. When we talk about involving stakeholders, we want to facilitate opportunities to share the data. So we could do this by doing a data workshop with our staff, with our stakeholders, so that everybody is on the same page and they can provide input on what they're seeing when it comes to the data. Of course, we want to make sure that we're monitoring and adjusting as needed. So before we even start disaggregating and analyzing, we want to make sure that we have some key performance indicators or KPIs set at the beginning so that when we are measuring, we are looking at checkpoints, we're looking at how things are moving, progressing, whether it's moving forward or backwards, but we have key performance indicators or key performance indicators to make sure that we are moving in a direction that we want to go. And if we're not moving in that direction, we are able to monitor and adjust. Lastly, with interpreting data visuals, we want to make sure that the strategy that we use is to be able to read charts and dashboards. And some of the ways you could do this, there's no shame in your game. You might need to read up on some things or find an expert in this field, take some courses, some workshops on how to be able to read and interpret data. Again, no shame in your game. This is something that is crucial in order to make data-driven decisions. All right, so let's take what we just learned and actually implement it in our story time or our scenario or case study. I will say this is an actual example of something that has really happened, but the names have been changed to protect the innocent. But just a little backstory, this is definitely an issue that is faced by many, and it happens to be faced by one of the leaders that I am currently coaching. So, one of my schools is facing a persistent decline in mathematics achievement, and that is very common across the board. Despite implementing a new curriculum and after school tutoring, recent benchmark data shows only slight improvement with significant achievement gaps among subgroups. So, what does this mean? Although there are slight improvements or progress being made, the gap is widening or is still wide among the different subgroups that are being tested. And fortunately and unfortunately, this is a school example that we're about to get into. So, when talking with my leader, I decided to sit down and craft a plan for navigating data driven decision making. And of course, in good old TQA fashion, we have yet another acronym. And so, for this session, our acronym is DATA. And so what data is we're going to define objectives, we're going to analyze patterns, we're going to translate insight, and assess impact. And what exactly does that mean? For defining objectives, we're going to clarify the purpose of our data collection. We're going to analyze patterns by looking for trends and correlations within the data. For translating insights, we're going to turn our data into actionable strategies. Yes, actionable. And then lastly, for our A, we're going to assess impact by regularly reviewing our decisions and outcomes and monitoring and adjusting as needed. So let's go ahead and apply this data-driven decision-making strategy into our scenario. All right, so now we are equipped with a scenario that we're working with, and we're also equipped with a strategy specifically to apply. So let's look at how we can take this strategy, the data strategy, and apply it to our scenario. So the first thing we want to do is define our objectives. By defining our objectives, we are clarifying our purpose for our data collection, and also finding that our primary objectives are to ensure that we are identifying specific skill gaps that's contributing to the achievement decline, that we're determining if the instructional strategies that we're currently using align with our students' learning needs. And then we also want to take time to think about the role of confidence in math performance that each student has, because that plays a key role. By doing this, we are ensuring that all stakeholders, the leader, the teachers, the students, understand the data sources that we've collected. Because remember, in the beginning, we talked about collecting varied data sources to make sure that we're all on the same page and ensure that we are moving our instruction forward and our decisions are going to drive our academic impact and our students' mindsets. I know that was a mouthful, but basically what I'm reiterating is that it takes everybody coming to the table to ensure success for all. The next thing we're going to do in our data protocol is analyze patterns. What we're looking for is what we're looking at is our benchmark assessments. We're looking at student work. We're looking at surveys. We're looking at all the things that we could do to identify key trends. And some of the key trends that we noticed when we sat down with our stakeholders is that students across all the grade levels were struggling with multi-step problem solving. We also found that most of the significant performance gaps were among English learners and students with disabilities. Additionally, we noticed that students with lower confidence levels in mathematics were more likely to underperform on assessments, even if they demonstrated some sort of understanding in class. Now, by finding and recognizing these patterns, it helped us as a team to laser like focus on targeted interventions instead of trying to throw spaghetti on the wall and make it stick. Okay? The next step in the data protocol is to translate insights. And by translating insights, what we're doing is we're using the data to develop actionable strategies. So that we're not just going to talk about and feel the data and talk about it and reminisce it and admire it. We're actually going to do something with it. And so some of the strategies, actionable that is, that came up from our conversation was looking at targeted small group instruction. Instead of increasing how much instructional time we spent, teachers were able to come up with ways to provide structure to small group sessions that specifically focused on problem solving strategies. We also, as a team, decided, and this is me coaching the leader, of course, that we wanted to integrate more real world math application problems to build critical thinking skills. So, in the lesson plans that were created and any activities, we hyper focus on real world scenarios, real world scenarios that build on critical thinking skills. The W's and the R's together is a nightmare sometimes. All right. The other thing we had to focus on was student confidence and their engagement. So we utilized strategies, or we planned for teachers to utilize strategies in the classroom, such as math talks, peer tutoring, positive reinforcement strategies to help build students' math confidence and well as their mindset, a growth mindset in students in the classroom. I'm chuckling because these W's and R's will get me today. So by translating the insights, we were able to communicate these strategies not only with teachers, but also with families and students to ensure that everybody understood the data that was ahead of us and how this data was being used to move forward in our steps towards achievement. And lastly, the assess impact. The reason why we do this is to make sure that we're ensuring effectiveness by creating a data review cycle. And we talked about this earlier on. What the data review cycle looked like specifically for this school was ensuring that teachers were conducting bi-weekly formative assessments to track student progress. The leadership team also held monthly data meetings to analyze new trends. Student and teacher surveys also were sent out to measure the changes in the confidence levels and the engagement levels of the students. And based on all the data that was collected for the assessing the impact, adjustments were made based on the ongoing results. And what happened? Because I know you were here for the T to see if all of this really worked. Well, I'm happy to report, shared by the leader, that after the first quarter of implementing this D.A.T.A strategy, the students started to receive targeted small group instruction. I'm sorry, because I'm so excited. The students that were receiving the targeted small group instruction were able to demonstrate significant improvements in their problem solving skills. And as an added bonus, their confidence levels rose as many students were engaged in math talk. So, what are we trying to say? Specific and actionable strategies with specific targeted supports lead to results, especially when you are monitoring and adjusting as needed. But following this D.A.T.A protocol helps you to fortify what you didn't know, what you now know, and how to implement moving forward. All right, all right, all right. So we have had the opportunity to dive into some information, self assess where we were, looked at some direct instruction, and apply that direct instruction. And now we get to the point where we get to ask ourselves some food for thought or some reflection questions to help us as we launch into being data driven decision making experts. Are you ready? Here we go. So, few questions to think about. How can I improve the way I collect and organize data? What decisions in my role could benefit from a more data driven approach? How can I better involve stakeholders in interpreting data? What tools can I adopt to monitor the outcome of decisions? How can I enhance my understanding of data visualization techniques? That goes to the first part of that self-assessment that we took in the beginning of our conversation. But more specific questions that really drill down to utilizing that data acronym for making decisions are these questions, and therefore, how does defining clear objectives at the beginning prevent reactive decision making? Mm, mm, mm. Y'all know we always talk about being proactive versus reactive. So that's a good question right there. Second question. Why is it important to look beyond test scores when analyzing patterns? And again, these questions are directly tied to our scenario story time example we just went through. Question 3. What are the risks of making changes without translating insights into actionable strategies? And question number 4. How can school leaders ensure that assessing impact is an ongoing process rather than a one-time review? Listen, if them questions stung the way they stung me when I had to present these to the leader, I know you in the right place. So just take a moment as we're wrapping up to think about how you can utilize these questions in your daily walk when you're making data-driven decision-making decisions. Well, I hope you had a good time because I know that I did. I want to take a moment to remind you of our objective for today, and I want you to let me know whether or not you feel like we met the objective. At the end of today's session, you are supposed to feel equipped as leaders with practical tools to interpret, analyze, and apply data effectively in the decision making process. And I hope that you can say yes to that question and tell why, which happens to be our next slide, where we talk about our reflection and share out. So, what is one key takeaway or insight that resonated with you the most and why? Go ahead and take a moment to drop that in the chat box for me so I can know that we have hit the mark. And I really want to know what's your takeaway. So, maybe that might be something we may need to embellish on in the future. So, take a moment to drop that in the chat box for us now. All right, you have just spent some time with us, and I want to say thank you so much. Let me give you some next steps for you to consider. First, consider joining us at our next Saturday school for the last session of this Leader Logistics series on Saturday, March 1st. You can also take time out to build a consultation call with the culture strategist herself, Dr. Q, by using that Calendly link on the page in front of you. And you can also join and engage. Don't just be a spectator, be a participator on all of our social media platforms. And I'll tell you what those are in a minute. But most importantly, I want you to take a moment to make a commitment to yourself and to your team that you will use the data driven decision making protocol entitled DATA moving forward in your next steps. Finally, this is the time where I get to do some bragging about some of the major packages that we have that the folks are just eating up. And I want to give you an opportunity to introduce them to you and give you an opportunity to be a part of the eating them up crew. All right. So one of the packages that we have is Planning is Key, where we kickstart, execute, and yield results. Another package we have is Roadmaps to Success package, where we utilize that GPS framework, where we gather data and insights, plan objectives and KPIs, strategize, and execute. Another package we have is It's a Wrap, where we celebrate, plan, and reflect. It's called the CPR framework, where we toast to our triumphs, look at our lessons learned, and focus on our future. And if you are a part of the folks that are still trying to land that job, why not consider purchasing the Land a Job package where we do resume audit, interview prep, and future plans framework. Well, friends, I'm so sorry to say that we have come to the end of the road here today. But I want to again thank you so much for taking time out of your busy Saturday to join the Culture Academy LLC with your culture strategist, CEO, and founder. That's me, Dr. Kiana Obeng, affectionately known as Dr. Q. A few slides back, I told you for next steps, why don't you consider joining and engaging with us on our social media platforms? And you probably don't know what those are. So if you are just joining us for the first time or you needed a little refresher, you can join us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X. And if you didn't catch all of that, you can take a moment to scan that QR code on your screen. That will take you to our digital business card where you can find all the ways to connect with us there. It was great. I had a great time talking about these subject areas that I am super passionate about. I hope that you have an amazing Saturday. And you don't forget to mark your calendar for next month, March 1st, the last of the Leader Logistics series. Can't wait to see you then. Until next time, guys. Bye.